The difference is the offense is oozing with talent. Can Bobo scheme up the right situations so that talent can show out? That was something that someone said to me and then asked, sort of rhetorically, after that, talking about the Dawgs, an insider, someone who's at practices, etc. I'm not going to go much more into detail than that. The difference is the offense is oozing with talent. Talking about the difference between this season and last, and we'll just see about that. I mean, I think that the tight ends very specifically, I think they're going to have to play well. But I think at wide receiver, you should see a noticeable jump in production. If they don't, then there's a reason to ask some questions at that stage about Coley, Bobo, but particularly I would say Coley. And let's just see if that even happens. So, I mean, he's done a great job of recruiting. And some of the guys that are coming in right now, that's a result of of Coley's work. But that they're, quote, oozing with talent. I mean, I think we're talking very specifically about the receivers. When you start talking about Gunner Stockton, I want to touch on this. Ryan wrote an article over on Dawg Post. I'll try to get it on the screen here real quick about sort of this criticism of Gunner Stockton. We talked about it. We had a Dawg Post meeting this past week, and it does get a little bit out of control sometimes about the criticism of Gunner. I think a lot of that is predicated on the Athlon, the coaches from the Athlon who are speaking on the record, but on background, and then from Paul Feinbaum. But I have to say, I watched the Sugar Bowl a week ago. And I think people are getting a little bit out over their skis with Gunner in terms of the criticism. It's going a little bit far. But I think that can Bobo scheme up the right situations so the talent can show out? He has in the past. What's sort of the more ignorant quarters out there, their first criticism, if the first criticism is of Mike Bobo, you immediately know there's an axe to grind. Because those of us who've been around long enough, you're talking about a person who completely changed the way that Georgia played offense with Mark Richt as head coach. Mark was happy to play some serious defense, run the fullback, run the fullback, and play like that. That was his style. Mike brought in a more risk-taking style, I guess if you want to call it. I don't know the best way to describe it. They threw the ball a lot more. He went and got Matthew Stafford, then he got Aaron Murray. With Hudson Mason as the quarterback, he broke school records in scoring. And you talk about 23 and 24, 23. Mike's offenses were really scoring a pile of points. So does this come down? The quote is, "Can Bobo scheme up the right situation so the talent can show out?" I mean, yeah, I do not think that Mike is as innovative as what you had in 2020 through 2022, but I think the difference there as well. At the time, when Kirby fired Coley in 19 or whatever you want to call it, I don't need any text messages, okay? But whatever you want to call it, that Coley wasn't there anymore. And the next season, you bring in someone who has produced a lot at Oklahoma State. I mean, in college, they were scoring a pile of points. But in 2020, it didn't look like Georgia's offense was any much better than it really had been in 2019. There were explanations for that, I will say that. But it wasn't great. They weren't just scoring points left and right. But then, as soon as everything lined up, the quarterback, meaning Stetson Bennett, Todd Monken looked a lot smarter as time went on, as Stetson Bennett got better. And frankly, after that switch, one thing to take advantage of, seeing Ryan's article makes me think we've got 3 months for the price of one with our magazine included. I'll put a link to that down below. We're going to have some insider stuff later this week. You want to take advantage of that. So grab that 3 months for the price of one. right now, but Bobo was putting on 45 points on. Oh gosh, he was at Clemson at the time. He was an elite defensive coordinator. He's putting up 45 points on them. It just they scored a pile of points that season. Scored 41 points with Hudson Mason as your quarterback. It's just not a lot, not great. I'll put it to you that way. A season ago in 2023, the Georgia offense went for 40 points a game. So his last 3 seasons as offensive coordinator at Georgia were 41, 40, and then 30, 31.5. The 31.5 is not good enough. And that's the question is, hey, this is what you just did. Can you get better? I mean, he certainly needs to, because that was not good enough a season ago. Some of that was at the quarterback, the inadequacies, too much back and forth from Carson. But it wasn't just Carson either, y'all. I mean, it was problematic. But looking forward, there are people that feel like the offensive playmakers have gotten better. But I'll say this. If the playmakers are not on the field, that's a problem. And I think, when you look back at 2024 at Georgia, you're talking about Jared Wilson missing multiple games, Tate Ratledge missing multiple games, ETN missing multiple games. You had Carson Beck missing, an important game, needless to say, in the Sugar Bowl. We did not see the Georgia that certainly could have been, and a lot of that dealt with, it was as a result of dealing with injuries. And on the offensive line, they never really were right. It didn't feel like to me or look like to me. And that's, Stacey Searles got to get that right. But the offense is oozing with talent. The folks I talked to, this isn't their first rodeo, in Athens and being around things. So I think the focus on the negativity is something I wrote about today at Dawg Post. I'll put that on the screen in a second here. It's a free article. You can go read it right now. But we've just gotten to the point here where we're not necessarily basing things in reality. It's too negative or too positive. There's a lot of positivity about Clemson right now. I think that's going to go a little bit aggressive on the positivity right now. All right, the vibe check in our digital world has been a negative one. End of season losses to teams you are just as good as or better than can do that. A letdown at the end of the season to Alabama, that's nothing new to Kirby Smart's program, but losing to a Notre Dame team that could hardly move the ball was another. There's a lot of negativity you can find out there. But I think the problem is that in the real world, I don't know. I say, all right, the overreaction to Georgia's positioning heading into 2025 has been in the negative world. It has been in the digital world. In the real world, that's harder to say. In other words, we don't know what all of these teams are going to do. We don't know what, there's this notion that Tech and Florida are getting better. I think Tech is. I don't know how much better. There's a notion that Florida's getting better. I think there's a lot of positive momentum about quarterback play at Florida, which is something that, with Kyle Trask, they beat Georgia. They won the East. They had a good season with him. They had a couple of good seasons with Kyle Trask, to be honest. But they have not had really solid quarterback play, probably dating back to the Tebow years. I mean, it's not been great. I'll put it to you like that. So there's really been nothing, and Florida's got their own. I mean, Florida's got problems, needless to say. But I think, here's another quote I'm just reading real quick. It's from one person saying, "The shit we saw last year, will he catch it or not? That wasn't there when I was out there. They caught the balls." So, that I think more than anything, the optimism right now is that, and I'll put this on the screen too. The optimism right now is that the 9 guys I have highlighted, but the ones on offense specifically, Branch, Thomas, and McCray, particularly Thomas and Branch, will give you something that you've not had in the past in terms of consistency and in terms of playmaking ability. I think they had playmaking ability last year for sure. The consistency was a real problem. But the quote, the shit we saw last year, will you catch or not, that wasn't out there. And I'm not even talking about the incoming freshman. There's a lot of there's a lot of hope that the young receivers will be very good for Georgia, particularly Taylor, but he's not a college football player yet. And as you may recall from AJ Green's time, George Pickens' time, that's not a spot that you just typically a guy comes in and immediately, like in the first 4 games, you can see it. I think Julio Jones played pretty well against Clemson in 2008. I think I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but it takes a second or two sometimes for receivers. So Noah Thomas, Dylan Bell, etc. Branch, they're going to have to, and I'm leaving out Colby Young. That's all out there now. None of the guys I just mentioned, only Bell was there last year, and I love Dylan. This is a big Dylan Bell house. So those guys have, that's the worry, or that's the difference. I think when you start talking about the difference between 24 and 5 is you may have regressed with playmaking ability from the throwing position, from throwing it at quarterback. But I don't know. I think you probably upgraded not just a little bit in receiver, but noticeably, I would say, at receiver. And that's going to be the thing that Georgia's going to have to take advantage of. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.